Hello boils and ghouls, welcome to the Ghoulish Garden. Today we'll be talking about basil, an excellent herb for any recipe or spell you might have up your sleeve, and easy to grow for gardeners of any caliber. So join us, let's dig in. Basil is an incredibly prolific herb. It's incredibly hardy. It will grow in most soils, and it produces just plentifully because every single one of these leaves is edible. We're getting to the end of summer now, and this one is planted outdoors, so it will die off in the winter, but that doesn't mean you can't have fresh basil growing throughout the winter. What we're going to do later on in this video is some propagation, where we'll cut some of these off, put them in water, and allow them to grow a new root system, and plant them in a pot. That way we can keep an endless supply of basil throughout the winter, and even plant some of those into the ground come springtime, and start the whole cycle over again every single year. You'll never have to buy another basil plant ever again. So let's go ahead and take a cutting here. And I'm going to show you guys how to propagate. Once I snip this guy off, we'll go inside and go from there. So I'm actually going to cut off a fair amount of this stem because I'm also going to save some of these leaves just to cook with. If you're just cutting off a piece for propagation purposes, then I would really cut it maybe here, where there's about 4 inches at least of topper. And you definitely want the topper where you've got the little baby leaves growing out, because that's what's going to produce you a new plant. It's these little baby leaves right there. So if I were just to cut it for that, I would do that. And anytime that you're cutting a plant, you want to cut basically at a joint. So you can see here, just past this little starter, that I've already actually cut this one off here once, and it started to grow this new little shoot here. And we want to keep that so I can keep this plant going. But I can go ahead and just cut this guy off right here. There we go. And so you got a nice clean cut. This nice tall branch here. And then this will grow another section right out there, kind of like it did with this one. Okay, so we're in my kitchen now, and we've got our basil cutting. So we want to get this clean, basically. Go ahead and fill your sink up with cold water and just a splash of white vinegar. Basically, this is going to wash off any little bitty bugs, any bits of dirt, or potential chemicals, depending on where you are. The white vinegar actually basically kind of keeps it perky, and keeps it from wilting, and it will also kill any of those tiny little bugs. So for propagation purposes, we're going to go ahead and cut off the piece that we want. And I mentioned when I was in the garden that I cut this big of a piece because I actually just want to save some of these leaves for cooking. So for the propagation part, I'm actually just going to cut it right here. And again, I do want to cut it on that little node, because that's just going to be where most of the plant's hormones are, basically. And that's going to produce those nice roots that we want to see. So we'll go ahead and just snip that off. And the next thing you want to do is actually you want to go ahead and remove the larger leaves. That's probably good. So you want something that looks kind of like that. Some people say to cut this off at an angle. You certainly can, you know, just kind of hold it like that. Just kind of, here we go. Yeah, it's kind of angle-ish, right? Doesn't really seem to matter in my opinion. But there's that. And this has already been rinsed. I'm going to go ahead and rinse it with cold water just to get any of that any of the white vinegar off of it because I don't really want that in the water while it's growing. This is the windowsill above my sink, and these are all the propagations that I have done last week. So what's really exciting is this. See if we can get this guy to focus on that. There we go. See all those little hairy tidbits? Those are new roots. It looks kind of creepy, and I love it. And so this guy is ready to plant in a pot. This is actually a variety of purple basil, so that's why it looks dark. It's just a different variety, that's all. But it's ready to go. It's got some really awesome roots growing in there. So I'm actually going to go ahead and take this guy out, and we'll plant him over in another shot. This one here is the same kind as we have, and it hasn't gotten quite as much. Has a couple of little ones. You can see a little bitty guy right there and a little bitty guy right there. So that one's going to stay in the water a little bit longer. I just want those roots to be a little bit more established before I plant it. But I can go ahead and put our new propagation in there with it. They can be buddies. I'm going to put a little bit more water in there. This is rainwater that I get from my rain barrel. If you don't have a rain barrel, you can absolutely still get rainwater. Just put a bowl out on your porch when it rains, and you'll end up with a bowl full of water that you can use for this. I do like using rainwater because it's essentially distilled. That's basically what rainwater is. It's distilled water. And you don't really want to use tap water because tap water has a lot of chlorine, a lot of fluoride, a lot of other additives that we humans like to add to it, and plants don't really like that very much. So let's take a look at a couple other of these. So this one, if he wants to let go of his brother, was cut off flat. So remember we were talking about flat versus tapered. But you can see some adorable little roots growing off of there. It looks like little fingers reaching out to you to take you over. Okay, moving on. I actually, in this one, this is a little bitty basil. I kind of wanted to see how short I could go and still get some roots. And you know what? How tiny this is? It does indeed have some little bitty roots growing. So you can go pretty short without very many leaves and still get a good propagation with this stuff. I love basil so much. These are actually thyme, as in TH, not as in a clock. These take a lot longer. So let me get some focus here. So there's a tiny little root coming out right there. These, I'll actually do a separate video on thyme where I'll talk about this, but they just tend to take a lot longer. These I actually cut almost a week ago. I think it was a week and a day. And so it really doesn't actually take that long for those little roots to start showing up, which is really exciting. And it's a fun experiment for kids to see, and adults. I mean, who doesn't love the wonder of life? So let's go ahead and we'll take this big boy out over to my table and we'll get him planted in some soil. We have our new little propagated plants with all of the lovely, hairy, creepy, crawly, reachy roots sticking out. And I have this little pot here that already has soil in it. This is just a standard garden soil. Pretty much any potting soil will work. Again, this guy's super hardy. He's not going to care that much. So this one, I'm going to go ahead and plant this basically all the way up to the top of this node. And you'll notice if you do this, if you do propagate your plants, that those roots will grow wherever that water is. Which actually brings me to another point. Across that week that it was sitting in the little cup of water, I did add rainwater to it once because it looked like it had gotten a little low. But that's about it. Just kind of keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't get dry for sure. And if there are any roots that are sticking up above the water, go ahead and add a little bit of water until it's covered. I'm just going to go ahead and plant it pretty deep. So I just kind of stuck my finger in the soil and made a fairly deep hole. And put it in there. And just kind of push the soil back in around it. Pretty simple. Here we go. Look at that cute little plant. He's ready to grow. And grow he will. I'm gonna put this guy on a sunny windowsill. You don't want to get a decent amount of sun. These guys like a lot of sun. If it starts to look kind of wilty, you might want to try a different windowsill. Now this pot also has sort of a built-in drainage tray. If you have a pot that doesn't, you should probably get a drainage tray because this guy's going to live indoors. So if there does end up being a little bit too much water, or maybe the hole in the bottom of your pot is kind of large and the water just sort of runs out quickly, you want that water to stay where the soil and the roots can continue to kind of suck it up. And if some water gets out onto your windowsill and just kind of sits there, it can potentially ruin your windowsill. Depending on how your windowsill is painted, finished, what have you. Yeah, and you don't want that. There you have it. Basil. Forever. Forever and ever and ever. Until next time, my darlings. Rest in peace.